All right, let's jump right into this. I was recently looking into this fascinating concept called the walkaway paradox. Basically, it turns out that caring less about winning a specific deal actually makes you way more likely to secure it on your own terms. Crazy, right? Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to break down the massive, often totally untapped power of simply being willing to walk away. I know, it sounds totally counterintuitive. We're usually taught to fight tooth and nail for what we want. But as we're going to see through the science of negotiation, economics, and career psychology, sometimes the absolute best way to get what you want is being 100% prepared to leave it behind.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First up, the walkaway paradox. 2, the science of BATNA. 3, setting your thresholds. 4, career and life leverage. And finally, executing the walkaway.
All right, part 1, the walkaway paradox, the counterintuitive secret to leverage.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's look at a real-world scenario with a chief revenue officer who was trying to diagnose his sales team's biggest weakness. Now, his team was busy. They were closing deals left and right, but their profit margins were totally slipping, and their client relationships were getting unmanageably messy. So he calls everyone together and asks them this simple but incredibly revealing question. What deals did you walk away from last quarter? He just wanted to see exactly where they drew the line in the sand.
And the answer he got? Well, it was kind of stunning. None. Not a single one. Literally every deal in their pipeline went through. On paper, sure, that sounds like a massive success. But in reality, absolute disaster. It meant they were taking on bad fit customers, suffering from crazy price erosion, and agreeing to completely unreasonable terms, all because they were completely unwilling to walk away. They literally had zero discipline.
And that right there perfectly illustrates our core paradox. Buyers negotiate the hardest with desperate sellers. If they sense for a second that you need the deal more than they do, they're going to squeeze you for every possible concession. But when they sense you might actually walk away, when you show a genuine, healthy indifference to the outcome, the dynamic completely flips. They immediately moderate their demands. The psychology in the room shifts from how much can I extract to how can we make this work for both of us.
So let's look at part 2, the science of BATNA, game theory and negotiation.
To really understand why this works so universally, we've got to look at a framework created by researchers Roger Fisher and William Ury from the Harvard Program on Negotiation. And this actually has deep roots in Nobel laureate John Nash's game theory. You might have heard of the Nash equilibrium. Anyway, this brings us to a concept called BATNA. That stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. In plain English, it's the absolute best course of action you can take if your current negotiations totally fall apart. Here's the secret. Your negotiating power doesn't come from being a smooth talker or a great debater. It flows directly from how strong your alternatives are. If you've got 5 other great deals waiting in the wings, you have a strong BATNA, which means you have incredible leverage.
Now, we need to distinguish between two things people constantly mix up. Your BATNA is your backup plan. Like, if you're buying a car, your BATNA is the fact that you can literally just walk across town to another dealer. Your reservation price, though, is the absolute floor you calculate based on that backup plan. It's the maximum price you'll pay or the minimum you'll accept before you say, no thanks, exercise your BATNA, and walk out the door.
But look, building a strong BATNA isn't passive. You can't just cross your fingers and hope it all works out. There are 4 distinct steps to make sure you aren't just running on false hope. First, list all your alternatives. Second, determine what each one is actually worth. Third, pick the one with the highest value. And finally, use that to calculate your reservation price. Doing this before you ever sit down to negotiate guarantees that your indifference isn't just a bluff. It's rooted in cold, hard reality.
Moving on to Section 3, setting your thresholds, protecting margins and sanity.
Once you know your BATNA, you can confidently set strict boundaries way before the heat of negotiation kicks in. Having built-in organizational rules for when to walk away just completely removes the emotion from the moment. You want specific red flags that trigger an immediate walkaway. If the price drops below your minimum, you walk. They demand unlimited liability, walk. If they're a strategic misfit, or honestly, if they disrespect your team during the sales process, walk away. Because trust me, it only gets worse after the contract is signed. Setting these rules protects your margins and saves your team's sanity.
And just to put some numbers behind why this is so critical, in professional services, payroll often eats up 50 to 70% of your total revenue. That is huge. It perfectly highlights why accepting a bad deal with compromised pricing is just so incredibly dangerous. It can wipe out a firm's profitability overnight. Revenue without margin is basically a company killer.
So having that ironclad discipline to walk away isn't just a tactic, it's a vital tool for survival and growth.
All right, Section 4, Career and Life Leverage. Applying BATNA to you.
Let's shift gears for a second, because this leverage concept isn't just for executives closing massive corporate contracts. It applies directly to your life. Right now, a staggering 68% of employees feel overwhelmed by rising living costs. And when you're operating under that kind of intense financial pressure, you've got an incredibly weak personal BATNA. People end up forced to accept toxic bosses, terrible working conditions, or low pay simply because they literally can't afford to walk away. This is exactly why financial experts are always pounding the table about building an emergency fund at 3 to 6 months of living expenses. When you do that, you aren't just saving for a rainy day, you are literally buying career leverage. You're creating a powerful financial BATNA that gives you the breathing room to walk away from a bad situation without your stress levels going through the roof.
On top of that, consider this wild stat. 70% of all jobs are never even advertised. They're filled entirely through networking. This just proves that you've got to be out there building relationships way before you actually need them. Crafting your career alternatives is a lifelong, ongoing process.
Which brings us to the absolute golden rule of career management. The best time to look for a job is when you don't need one. People who are already happily employed just naturally have way more bargaining power. You've already got a great job, which is a super strong BATNA, so you can negotiate salary offers freely. You can ask for what you're actually worth because, hey, you literally have nothing to lose if they say no.
Finally, Section 5, Executing the Walkaway. How to exit professionally. Okay, so you've built your alternatives, you've set your thresholds, and you're staring at a bad deal right in front of you. How do you actually pull the trigger? The trick is matching your exit to the situation. If you're dealing with toxic behavior or a permanent mismatch, use a door-closing exit. Keep it firm and professional. Just say, we've determined this isn't the right fit. Simple. But if it's just a matter of budgets not lining up right now, use a door-open exit. Something like, the economics don't work today, but we'd love to revisit this later. That tactfully preserves the relationship, and honestly, you'd be surprised how often they come back once they realize you won't cave to pressure.
As you're evaluating your opportunities, whether we're talking about massive business deals or your own career path, keep this awesome quote from Tony Robbins in mind. Success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. It is so unbelievably easy to get caught up chasing deals or promotions or just grinding away to meet the world's standard of success. But if you aren't finding fulfillment, what is the point? Having the power to walk away ultimately means you have the power to protect your own happiness.
So remember, the best deals you ever make are often the ones you decide not to take. I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Are you clinging to deals and jobs just out of sheer necessity, or are you actively building the alternatives that give you the true power to walk away? Think about what steps you can take this week to build up your BATNA, set those thresholds, and finally take total control of your negotiations. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.